In the 1970s, a video game was created that has taught millions of people about the trials and struggles of America's westward expansion. This is the Oregon Trail. It begins in the 19th century during the westward expansion. Pioneers had many challenges to overcome during this tough time. They faced sickness, weather, and some of these led to injuries or even death. During their travels, they even had to ford rivers. Unfortunately, it did not always work out. At the end of the trail, they were able to make land claims and have a better life, but sadly, only about 9 out of 10 pioneers made it to the end of the trail. Don Rawitch was a student teacher wanting to find a fun way to teach his students about the Oregon Trail. Later, Bill Heineman and Paul Dillenberger came up with the brilliant idea to make it into a video game. Once they were done student teaching, they deleted the game off the computer and put the code onto a piece of paper. Some years later, Don is working for MEC. He asks if he can upload the code to the MEC mainframe. They said yes, but because he didn't make a deal, it was now MEC's property. Later, MEC updates the game into the iconic Apple II version. Yes, they wanted to make this game for the kids, but they had a challenge. That challenge was making the game fun, but educational at the same time. In order to do this, they had to add elements to the game, like different ways to die and the risky moves you had to make. For example, while fording a river, there's a small chance that you can make it across just fine, or there's another chance that you could just lose an ox or destroy your wagon or even lose your people. Things like that is what makes this game fun and exciting. The developers believed that if the kids were having fun while playing the game, they would remember this later in their life. They were very correct. The excitement is what helped lots of these people remember the game even after not playing it for a very long time. This led into something called the edutainment movement. The edutainment movement is where schools started using videos and video games to start teaching kids. Like I said, it helped them remember and learn things much easier. The cool thing is that even though it was made to be an educational tool, kids and adults still play it in their free time. A little fun fact, the creators never made any money off of this game whatsoever. Rawitch dove deep into primary sources. He tried his best to get accurate information about the Oregon Trail. He and his crew of programmers were basically the pioneers of educational gaming. They had very limited resources to make the game, yet they still did it. To write the game, Rawitch used an HP 2100 mini computer. They allowed their students to play the game and they loved it. Around 10 years later, they had a brilliant idea to release it to the public. It was publicly released by MEC and was playable on the Apple II. The creators knew they had a responsibility to make the game historically accurate. In order to do that, they needed to add lots of things to this game. For example, ways people died, diseases, injuries people had gotten, and hunting. Dysentery was a huge part of this game and is a very iconic death. Although it turns out dysentery is actually not that accurate. People usually died of cholera. It turns out that cholera is in the game, it's just not as common as the other diseases. Like I said earlier, fording rivers was actually accurate. Either pay a toll for the ferry or risk your life and your wagon. The way hunting and supplies work is another example. When people hunted for food on the trail, they could only carry a certain amount of it back to the wagon. In the game, people usually try to shoot every animal they see, but you can only bring back 100 pounds of the food. I don't think those people realize that every wasted bullet decreases your score at the end of the game. By making history interactive, the children are able to play these games and have fun while learning. Children having this right was great for learning about the Oregon Trail. Oftentimes, kids will remember the fun times they had at school rather than the boring tests and studying. Even for me, I only remember the fun projects and games we played. By balancing fun and education, kids will remember the true facts of history. That is how most minds work, and that is why the programmers are brilliant. The Oregon Trail is in TV shows and YouTube videos. Here's a couple examples.
Picture this, it's 1850 and you're a fur trader from Independence, Missouri, and all of a sudden you and your family pack your bags and you head 2,000 miles west to Oregon. Why? In order to get free land and to avoid the East. Well, that experience that I just laid out is a real thing called the Oregon Trail that actually happened, and they made it into a game.
The next clip is from a show that is set in the late 80s, early 90s. This is cool because it's exactly when everyone was playing Oregon Trail.
Hey, what you doing?
Playing a historically accurate game called the Oregon Trail.
That sounds boring.
Hardly. My wagon broke an axle and my wife died of dysentery.
Well, can you pause it for a sec?
It does seem rude to push onto Oregon while my daughter Mabel is mourning the loss of her mother.
So what do you say?
I say we collect gravel.
There you go.
In case you're worried, Mabel and I did finally make it to Oregon, where I remarried and lived to the ripe old age of 41.
Later, they released the Oregon Trail on many devices. Oregon Trail 2 was released in 1995 on PC, Mac, and DOS. This introduced better graphics and more color. It even depicted characters with much more detail. Then later, the 40th anniversary of Oregon Trail had arrived. This triggered the release of Oregon Trail for the Wii. It had updated graphics and everything was now 3D. You were able to control the wagon with your controller. The game was much more immersive. The Oregon Trail was released on the Nintendo Switch in 2021. This version brings back the original pixel style, still with modern enhancements. During the story, you get to see more of the Native Americans' perspective during that time. I interviewed the superintendent at my school and my mom. They both have played Oregon Trail, and my mom especially is a huge fan. Can you share a memorable moment or feedback from students when they played the Oregon Trail?
I thought the Oregon Trail was a good learning experience for kids. It allowed for them to think outside the box and make decisions about how they were going to go about getting through the trail. I always found it funny because I always died in the river.
Yep, same thing with me. Every time I've played, I've always died in the river. When you were still in school, did you play the Oregon Trail? If so, what was it like to play the game in school?
So yeah, I played Oregon Trail in school, and it was one of our favorite games. I remember, I think I was in like 6th or 7th grade, and the internet wasn't that popular yet. I think you could get on it, but we didn't really use it, but we played computer games and we learned how to type. And one of the games we played was Oregon Trail, and it was super fun, and I remember everybody loved it, and it was like instantly addicting. And I remember also some of my friends got it, and we would name like the people in our party after our friends and stuff, and then we would laugh when we died of dysentery. So that's my experience with Oregon Trail.
Dawn spoke at a 2011 Duster Magic. Duster Magic is where people sit down and listen to somebody speak about something. In this case, Dawn was talking about the making of Oregon Trail and the school he did it at. That is the end of my documentary. I picked Oregon Trail for this video because it is an excellent example of the rights and responsibilities of the children who play and the developers who made the game. And remember, in the end,